Hi, and welcome to ABC Planning for the 2020 to 2021 academic school year. This video will look at planning for instructional flexibility with the blended learning station rotation model. My name is Megan Crowley-Sullivan, and I am the Northern California Program Coordinator for the Ideal Institute at Loyola Marymount University. Our institute partners with schools across the state of California and Arizona to provide professional learning opportunities, instructional coaching, teacher leadership certification, and school and admin support, specifically in the areas of blended learning and technology integration. Like many of you, we've been busy working with our schools, our teachers, and our students trying to figure out how to best handle this large-scale transition to partially distant or online learning due to the worldwide COVID-19 pandemic. We know that there is still a lot up in the air and that there are things constantly changing. We also know that there is no one out there who currently has all the answers. And we don't even want to begin to pretend like we do either. However, our access to many different schools, teachers, and educational leaders has given us some wonderful insight into the current plans and decisions that are being made in response to ensuring that effective instruction and student learning continues regardless of what may come this fall. Now we know that there is no perfect way to plan for this fall because every teacher's students, curriculum, experience, and context will affect their planning. But we want to walk you through one way that you could potentially begin to think about planning for flexibility. You may not know what is around the corner, but you can plan to ensure that regardless of your school's status, that students will still be given access to multiple opportunities to learn, process, and apply their understanding each and every day. Using different online technology tools, a learning board, and the station rotation model of blended learning, you can plan smarter and not harder. So let's take a look at what I mean. First off, we have to acknowledge the giant elephant in the room. No one seems to have any idea what is actually going to occur this fall, because every single day is subject to change. Some schools may be offering instruction in person, others in some sort of hybrid model, while others are continuing to completely provide instruction online. That being said, one day you might be learning in person and the very next day be suddenly forced to shift to online learning again. We don't really know what's going to happen, but we do know that we're all going to have to be flexible. We also know that from this past spring, our students need us and they need each other. Many, if not all of them, are going to need some serious social emotional learning support to handle the pressures and anxieties of our current world's realities. We also know that building community, school culture, and opportunities for interaction during these unprecedented times are going to be a lot harder than they normally are. We're going to need to be very intentional about how we support our students in this area. We also know that regardless of us putting our best foot forward and shifting to online learning as fast as we possibly could this spring, students are still likely to have large academic gaps, misconceptions, and misunderstandings that they might not have had otherwise. They're going to need targeted intervention, support, and constant progress monitoring through check-ins and student conferencing to ensure that they don't fall between the cracks or fall behind even more. So how do we as teachers and educational leaders do all of this without losing our minds and without burning out all of our teachers? We do it by being as intentional as we possibly can in our planning. If we think traditionally about how we plan, we typically break our lesson into 3 parts. In these 3 parts, we frame the learning, we present the learning, and then we anchor it. We may think of our plan out in the OPE framework, where we identify the desired results or objective, we determine at the end how we want to evaluate students' ability to do that objective, and then we fill in the middle with ways to roll this learning out gradually. If we think about this vertically, we hook our students' interest. We connect their prior knowledge to really deepen and delve into their schema. We introduce the essential questions, their learning targets, and the mastery objectives, and we post those and make sure our students understand them so they're able to think metacognitively about those objectives throughout the process of our class. We then provide that instruction, that explicit understanding, or the I do of our lesson, where all of the cognitive load of the learning is on the teacher's shoulders and the students are being slowly presented it. We then relinquish some of that control to the students and they practice it with us during the we do portion, where we guide the students through that objective. After that, there's some sort of collaborative discussion, work, or practice where they're doing that objective together in partners, in pairs, or in small groups. There's also then independent practice, where the full cognitive load is now on the student's shoulder and they're expected to do it alone. We end the lesson with some sort of assessment that we're able to gauge the student's understanding, their progress towards mastery of that objective, and we're able to take that data and inform the next day's instruction. It's also where we summarize and debrief the learning for the day, and we revisit those essential questions and learning targets so that the students can really reflect metacognitively on how far they've come and where they still need to go. Most teachers would agree that this type of organization is probably how they were trained to plan a lesson, so that it maximizes student understanding throughout the entire process. And it's typically how most of us also write our plans. However, it might look a little bit different when you plan out a blended learning lesson. So let's take a look at that. Although there are many different blended learning models out there, you most commonly will see schools utilize the station rotation model. When we plan for this model, we flip our understanding on its side and think about its organization horizontally rather than vertically. We still have those three parts of a lesson. We frame the learning, we present the learning, and we anchor the learning. At the beginning, we still hook student interest, maybe connecting it to prior knowledge. We introduce the essential questions and the objectives, and we post it and ensure they understand. We then provide explicit instruction to the whole group. But now, instead of like the former plan, we do it in a mini lesson where we're providing that I do work and then some degree of we do. But then we break into a station rotation model where the rest of the gradual release model is broken into small stations that are happening simultaneously. In the teacher group down here in the blue circle, we know that the teacher is providing targeted instruction that's specifically focused on the student's needs within that particular group. In the collaborative group, students still have a chance to work together in pairs or small groups on that particular objective. And then in both the tech station and the independent station, students are given a chance to practice that objective either online or offline, but independently. So the cognitive load is on their shoulders. After that, we still end whole group with some sort of lesson assessment so that we can be sure that we're gauging authentically the student's understanding and not their partner's understanding. We revisit the essential questions and the learning target. We do a summary and debrief, and we use the data pulled from this lesson to inform the next day's instruction. Now, this station rotation model won't always have 4 stations. Depending on a variety of factors, including the objective of the day, its content, the schedule, or the time allotted for that particular lesson, the needs of the students, the resources you have to teach that objective, and many other factors, you may have 3 stations, or you may have 2 stations, or you might have some other number of stations where rather than a teacher-led group, the teacher is pulling individual students or an even smaller number of students out of that independent station for deeper intervention, student conferencing, or data talks. However, regardless of how many stations or how the stational time looks during this portion of the lesson, students are being given space to experience that day's particular objective in different ways. They're getting time with the teacher to work through it and time to explore it either collaboratively or independently online or offline. This model ensures that students are given access to multiple opportunities to learn, process, and apply their understanding each and every day of a given objective. So the question then becomes, how can we intentionally use this style model to plan for this upcoming fall to ensure flexibility? To do this, we're going to think about our objectives in chunks, in the chunks that you see in a station rotation model. If we think about these various chunks that students would need to experience to be able to achieve a particular objective, we can then use these chunks to create a learning board. We can use a learning board to plan in chunks. Here you can see an example of a learning board that would be pushed out to students each and every day during this upcoming fall. Your learning board could look differently than this, but it would still include all of the research-based components of a good lesson. And it would include all of those needed instructional chunks of time for students to process and learn your objectives. It would have your objective and essential questions at the top. You would provide some component of explicit instruction. We would encourage this to be a video, either a video that you create using a tool like Screencastify or a video that you find online on YouTube, Khan Academy, Vimeo, or some other video source that perfectly teaches the objective that you want students to learn during that period of time. You would then have specified times for students and small groups to work with the teacher and to work collaboratively. This would be time for the teacher to provide guided support and targeted instruction to the need of the students in his or her groups. You would also have opportunities for students to practice the given objective both offline independently and online independently. This tech option might be adaptive software that addresses the specific objective or an online activity that students work on within their Google Classroom or whatever learning management system you might have. You would finally, at the end, have a lesson assessment that all students can participate in to show their understanding and give you insight into where they are in achieving that specified objective. Depending on the subject, topic, area, or needs of your students, you may also want to, at the bottom of your learning board, include extension or review work for students to practice previous objectives or be given a challenge. Now, just like you wouldn't have 4 stations in a station rotation model lesson every time, you won't always have every single one of these identified chunks at every single day's learning board. But you would plan in chunks so that as a teacher, you are ready for whatever the next day may throw at you. Keeping this way of planning in mind, let's now think this through as we look at how this would work regardless of whether your school is in person, working in some sort of hybrid, or continuing to learn online from a distance. So first off, we're going to look at an in-person situation for the fall. If your school is operating under Plan A, a majority of the students are present in person and on site. You may have a small percentage of students at home whose parents may have opted out of attending school this fall. Maybe they've been exposed to the virus recently or they're medically fragile. But regardless, a vast percentage of your student population is on campus. They're following CDC guidelines for spacing and all of the necessary medical protocols to keep them safe on site. To account for maybe limited classroom size, you may also have half of your grade in one room with an aide or fingerprinted volunteer monitoring them, while the other half is in your classroom with you, the main teacher. In this situation, the teacher sends out the learning board to all of the students in the morning. The students at home have access to all of the chunks of learning and can begin to work through the essential objectives and questions, the video recorded mini lesson, the text station, and the individual station at their own time, at their own pace. Or they can begin to work on it during the predetermined block of time that you have planned out for this particular class. The students at school likewise have access to these different components, regardless of whether they're in the main classroom with their teacher or in the auxiliary classroom with the additional adult. In this situation, the teacher is the one that rotates. He or she rotates between groups of students, providing them with the targeted instruction and guided practice that they need within their zone of proximal development. When it's time for the teacher to work with the students at home, he or she can find a location in their classroom, or they can sit at their desk and meet with the kids at home online synchronously using Zoom or Google Meet. Likewise, the students at home can work within a breakout room on Zoom or Google Meet collaboratively during that time, while the students in person can work collaboratively using whiteboards or personal devices that allow for them to continue to maintain social distancing, but still have the much needed interaction. In this situation, this Plan A, the teacher purposely plans to include intervention, student conferencing, SEL, and culture building into that rotational time, either in the collaborative group or the teacher-led group, or they can intentionally plan to include it at another time during the school week. Regardless, planning in chunks will allow for both in-person and at-home students to receive meaningful support and instruction, both synchronously and asynchronously, without the teacher having to be 2 places at one time. Let's now look at the second situation, or Plan B. If your school is operating in a hybrid style, you'll be planning to have a percentage of your students at home and a percentage of students in person. rotating throughout the week. Your school is probably doing this to minimize the number of students on campus that are exposed to each other at one time. You might be operating on a 2-day on 2-day off schedule, or you might be operating with a morning cohort and an afternoon cohort schedule. Regardless of how your hybrid model works, you're going to similarly want to create a daily learning board that can be pushed out to all students in the morning, whether they are in person or at home. This learning board should still present all of the necessary chunks and include an initial pre-recorded or found video that provides the initial explicit instruction for the day's objective. Depending on how your school is organizing this hybrid, you may need to organize your lessons into one objective that can span 2 slightly longer days, or 2 smaller objectives that don't necessarily need as much full targeted support for each individually from the teacher. As you can see here in this image, the blue boxes surround all of the chunks of learning that can be done at home, while the red boxes surround the chunks of learning that can or are better to be done on campus. Whether or not the students are in person or on campus, they will still be given access to the essential questions and mini lesson, and they still will be assessed so as to inform the teacher's work. However, to maximize the impact and time on campus and in person, all targeted support, collaborative practice, intervention, student conferencing, social emotional learning support, and culture building will be done together on site, with the other chunks of learning being done from a distance. In this situation, planning around the station rotation model, using that learning board and online tools like a learning management system to push out that learning board and collect the work, will likewise allow for the teacher to plan in one single way and not be in 2 places at once. Finally, if we look at Plan C, which is the plan most, if not all, teachers within California will be starting the year off with, students will all be receiving instruction from a distance. They will be fully learning online with their teacher, providing synchronous or asynchronous chunks of learning through a video conferencing tool like Google Meet or Zoom, as well as an LMS. In this particular plan, you may have certain sites opt to also have a location on campus for a small number of students whose parents maybe are essential workers and they desperately need that childcare. But those students, although on site, will still continue to learn virtually like their classmates would, but will be monitored on site by an adult. In this situation, again, all of the students will receive the learning board in the morning, and they will all have access to the different learning chunks to do at their own time and pace, or to do within the predetermined blocks of time for that particular subject. As you can see in this image, the blue boxes represent the works that should be done asynchronously, while the red boxes are the ones that can and probably should be done more synchronously using video conferencing programs like Zoom or Google Meet. Students will know exactly what time to log into their Zoom or Google Meet accounts and meet with teachers in small groups because it'll be identified in their learning board. Likewise, students will meet collaboratively in breakout rooms using these programs during their given time if it's also identified in the board as well. As you can see, regardless of your school status, A, B, or C, you just create one lesson plan, one that you can be pushed out to students at home each and every day in the form of a learning board. So that regardless of things changing from one day to the next, you're not staying up till crazy hours of the night trying to adjust your lessons so that instruction isn't lost. And nor are you driving yourself absolutely mad trying to create learning for the kids at home and learning for the kids in person, and then trying to teach both of them simultaneously at the same time. Rather, you're just intentionally planning in a way that allows for flexibility regardless of the changes that occur. You're working smarter, not harder. Teachers' jobs are already hard enough, and the current reality is already crazy enough. So we don't need any additional complications or any additional stress if we can help it. So to sum up what is most definitely too long of a video, and if you made it through all my talking, you are absolutely amazing. You're going to try to work this fall on planning in learning boards that chunk material rather than how you might have planned in the past. So don't plan like you might have on the left here, where you write it in your lesson plan book, because then you would need to also create learning boards and also write out what you're going to do for the classroom. If you do that, you will absolutely drive yourselves insane. Instead, use the learning board, use your learning management system to push that board out to out to your students each morning and collect their assignments. Use learning chunks that allow for you to adjust if you need to, and use those online tools and independent work time so that students are able to work asynchronously when they're at home in the other room on site, or they're just across the room when you're working with another small group of students. Here at the Ideal Institute, we fully understand that your situation may not even resemble what we just presented at all, but hopefully our presentation has helped a little bit in thinking about how you might organize your instruction, save yourself a little stress, and plan in a way that allows for a little more flexibility and transition come what may this fall. If you're part of one of the current schools that we work with, our workshops this year will be digging into different areas of this planning style throughout the year. We'll be supporting you in making each and every one of those learning chunks more meaningful. If you're not one of the current schools that we work with, feel free to check out our LMU Ideal website or email us at ideal.lmu.edu to contact us. Our mission has always been to seek to advance learning by fostering forward-thinking and transformative, sustainable educational practice. We want to partner with you and as many schools, teachers, leaders, and areas within education as we possibly can so that we can continue to help and support as many students as we possibly can. Thanks so much for watching this video. You are all incredible teachers and leaders, and we wish you the very best luck this upcoming year in providing the quality instruction and learning for your students.